Without telling my husband anything, I set out for the countryside to help his ailing mother. I had brought some food and medicine with me, planning to quietly deliver what she needed. But the moment I stepped inside, I froze in shock at what I saw. Before we continue, don't forget to write in the comments which country you're from and how old you are. Enjoy listening. The road to Doña Carmen's cottage was a narrow, winding scar through the sun-baked hills of Castilla, its gravel surface crunching beneath the tires of my aging Renault. The late afternoon sun hung low, a molten orb casting long, jagged shadows across the windshield, painting the landscape in hues of amber and blood red. I, Isabella Morales, gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands, my knuckles pale, my heart a relentless drumbeat in my chest. The silence of the countryside was oppressive, broken only by the low hum of the engine and the occasional rattle of loose stones. I hadn't told my husband, Javier, where I was going, not a single word. He was drowning in his work at the bank in Madrid, his days consumed by endless meetings and spreadsheets, his nights by a bone-deep exhaustion that left little room for anything else. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing fear that had taken root in my chest, a cold, heavy weight that grew with every passing day. His mother, Doña Carmen, was unwell, and I was determined to help her, even if it meant keeping my journey a secret. Carmen was the heart of the Morales family, a woman of quiet strength and fierce pride. She had raised Javier and his sister, Ana, in the vibrant chaos of Madrid, teaching them the value of hard work, the comfort of tradition, and the importance of family. After her husband, Don Rafael, passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, she had retreated to her childhood home in the countryside, a quaint stone cottage nestled among olive groves and lavender fields. She was stubborn, fiercely independent, and refused to admit when she needed help, even when her voice trembled or her hands shook. The last time we spoke, over a crackling phone line, her voice had been frail, almost ghostly, as if the life had been sapped from her. She'd mentioned a persistent cough, a fever that wouldn't break, but brushed it off with her usual dismissal. Es nada, Isabella, just a cold. But I knew better. Carmen wasn't one to complain, so if she sounded weak, it was serious, perhaps dangerously so. I glanced at the passenger seat, where a wicker basket sat, carefully packed with jars of homemade gazpacho, its rich tomato scent mingling with the car's stale air. There was also a loaf of crusty bread from the panaderia near our apartment, a wedge of sharp manchego cheese wrapped in wax paper, and a small bag of medicines I'd gathered from the pharmacy, paracetamol, cough syrup, and a bottle of antibiotics I'd persuaded the pharmacist to give me without a prescription, promising it was for a family emergency. My plan was simple: drive to the cottage, drop off the supplies, check on Carmen, and leave without making a fuss. Javier didn't need to know. He was already stretched thin, his eyes shadowed with stress, his temper fraying at the edges. I wanted to spare him the worry, to handle this quietly, as a good wife and daughter-in-law should. The countryside stretched endlessly around me, a tapestry of golden fields and gnarled olive trees, their branches twisted like ancient hands reaching for the sky. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and dry earth, but there was something else, too, a faint, metallic tang that lingered in my nostrils, unsettling me. The closer I got to Carmen's cottage, the heavier the silence became. No birds sang. No wind stirred the leaves. It was as if the world had paused, holding its breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. My phone buzzed on the dashboard, and I reached for it, hoping it was Javier checking in, perhaps sensing my unease from miles away. But it was just a low battery warning, the screen flickering weakly. I cursed under my breath. The signal out here was notoriously unreliable, and I hadn't thought to charge the phone before leaving Madrid. A foolish oversight, one I'd regret soon enough. The cottage came into view at last, a modest stone structure nestled between olive trees, its terracotta roof glowing faintly in the fading light. It looked smaller than I remembered, almost swallowed by the vastness of the landscape, its faded blue shutters closed tight like eyes refusing to see. A single lavender bush grew near the door, its purple blooms drooping as if weighed down by the same unease that gripped me. I parked the car, the engine ticking as it cooled, and sat for a moment, staring at the cottage. My heart thudded, a mix of determination and dread. I grabbed the basket, its weight grounding me, and stepped out, my sandals crunching on the gravel path. The air was warm but heavy, pressing against my skin, and that metallic scent was stronger now, sharp and unsettling. I approached the front door, its paint peeling in long, curling strips, and knocked softly, then harder when no one answered. "Doña Carmen?" I called, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound calm. "It's Isabella. I brought you some food and medicine." Silence. I knocked again, louder, my heart creeping into my throat. Carmen was meticulous about locking her doors. She'd lived through Spain's turbulent years, through stories of bandits and worse in these remote parts. She'd told me once, over a glass of Rioja, about the time a stranger had come to the cottage late at night, years ago, and how she'd scared him off with Raphael's old hunting rifle. The memory made my stomach twist. I tried the handle, and to my shock, the door creaked open, unlocked. A cold wave of fear washed over me. Carmen would never leave her door open, not even for a moment. I stepped inside, the air cool and musty, tinged with that same metallic scent, now so strong it made my eyes water. The living room was dim, the heavy curtains drawn, casting the space in a twilight gloom. The furniture was as I remembered. A worn but polished wooden rocking chair in the corner, a small table covered with a lace cloth, a framed photo of Javier and Ana as children, their smiles bright and carefree. But something was wrong. The air felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm, heavy with unspoken tension. "Carmen?" I called again, my voice echoing in the stillness. The basket felt impossibly heavy in my arms as I moved toward the kitchen, my footsteps muffled by the threadbare rug that ran the length of the room. The kitchen was a disaster. Dishes piled in the sink, crusted with remnants of food, a stark contrast to Carmen's usual fastidiousness. A loaf of bread sat on the counter, half-eaten, a knife abandoned beside it, its blade glinting faintly in the dim light. A glass of water had been knocked over, the liquid pooling on the counter, dripping onto the floor. My unease deepened, curling like smoke in my chest, thick and suffocating. I set the basket down on the table, the jars clinking softly, and turned back to the living room, my eyes scanning for any sign of Carmen. That's when I saw it. In the corner, near the stone fireplace, a chair lay overturned, its legs jutting upward like the bones of a fallen beast. Beside it, a glass had shattered, its contents spilled across the floor in a dark, glistening pool. My breath caught in my throat. The liquid was thick, red, unmistakable. Blood. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the floor, the basket tipping over, jars of gazpacho rolling across the tiles with a dull clatter. "Carmen!" I screamed, my voice raw, tearing through the silence like a blade. Panic surged through me, hot and overwhelming, drowning out reason. I scrambled to my feet, my hands trembling as I searched the house. The bedroom was empty, the bed unmade, sheets twisted as if someone had leapt out in a hurry. A single slipper lay abandoned by the nightstand, its partner missing, and a faint smear of dirt marked the floor, as if someone had dragged their feet. The bathroom was empty too, the mirror fogged with condensation, as if someone had been there moments ago, the air still warm and humid. I checked the small pantry, its shelves lined with jars of preserved figs and almonds, the closet with its neatly folded linens, even the crawl space under the stairs, its darkness swallowing the beam of my phone's flashlight. Nothing. No Carmen. No answers. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Had Carmen fallen? Hit her head? Had someone broken in, attacked her? Was she lying somewhere, bleeding, unable to call for help? I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. No signal. Of course. The countryside was a dead zone, a place where technology faltered, where help was always too far away. I cursed myself for not bringing a charger, for not telling Javier where I was going, for thinking I could handle this alone. I ran outside, the basket forgotten, hoping to find some sign of her. A footprint in the dirt, a dropped scarf, anything to tell me she was okay. The backyard was overgrown, the garden Carmen once tended with such care now a tangle of weeds and wilted roses, their petals scattered like ashes. I called her name, my voice swallowed by the vastness of the fields, the words echoing back to me, hollow and unanswered. The sun was nearly gone now, the sky a deep bruise of purple and blue, the first stars piercing through like pinpricks of light. I stood frozen, my breath ragged, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. And then I saw it, a faint, flickering light in the distance, coming from the old barn at the edge of the property. My blood ran cold. Carmen never used the barn. She'd always said it was too dilapidated, its roof sagging, its walls riddled with rot. Javier had once joked, during a family dinner filled with wine and laughter, that the barn was haunted, a place where the ghosts of their ancestors lingered, watching from the shadows. I'd laughed it off then, teasing him about his imagination, but now, standing alone in the twilight, the memory sent a shiver down my spine, sharp and unrelenting. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to run back to the car, to drive to the nearest town and call for help. The nearest village, La Puebla, was 20 minutes away, and the police there, though slow, could search the property, bring lights, bring answers. But if Carmen was in that barn, hurt or worse, every second mattered. I couldn't abandon her, not now, not after coming this far. I spotted a rusty shovel leaning against the side of the house, its handle rough and splintered, and grabbed it, the weight of it grounding me, giving me a sliver of courage. I started toward the barn, the flickering light growing brighter with each step, a beacon in the gathering darkness. The barn loomed ahead, its weathered wooden walls blackened by time, its door slightly ajar, swaying faintly as if beckoned by an unseen hand. The creak it made as I pushed it open echoed like a scream in the stillness, sending a jolt through my body. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the faint smell of decay mingling with something sweeter, almost sickly, like overripe fruit left to rot. A single lantern hung from a beam, its flame casting long, wavering shadows across the walls, turning the splintered wood into grotesque shapes that seemed to writhe and twist. And there, in the center of the barn, sat Carmen. She was in an old wooden chair, its back carved with faded floral patterns, her hands folded calmly in her lap, her face pale but composed. She didn't look sick. She didn't look hurt. She looked wrong. Her dark eyes, usually warm with a hint of mischief, were cold, unreadable, like the surface of a frozen lake. Her hair, normally pinned neatly in a bun, hung loose, strands clinging to her face, streaked with dirt. She wore a simple black dress, the kind she reserved for funerals, its hem stained with mud, as if she'd been walking through the fields. The sight of her, so calm in this decaying place, sent a chill through me, deeper than the cold of the evening air. "Isabella," she said, her voice steady, almost too calm, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You shouldn't have come." I froze, the shovel slipping slightly in my grip, its weight suddenly unbearable. "Carmen, are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling, betraying the fear clawing at my chest. "I saw blood in the house. What's going on?" Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw something flicker in them. Regret, perhaps, or pity, or something darker I couldn't name. "You need to leave," she said, her tone firm, unyielding. "Now!" But I couldn't move. My gaze darted around the barn, and that's when I saw them. Figures in the shadows, their forms indistinct but unmistakably human. There were 3 of them, standing silently, their faces obscured by the darkness, their presence heavy, oppressive. My heart lurched, the shovel suddenly feeling useless in my hands, a child's toy against whatever this was. "Who are they?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, swallowed by the weight of the air. Carmen's lips pressed into a thin line, her hands tightening in her lap. "You don't understand, Isabella," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You were never supposed to." The figures stepped forward, and as the lantern's light caught their faces, my breath hitched, my world tilting on its axis. They were impossible, yet undeniable. The first was Miguel, Carmen's brother, who had died in a car accident 10 years ago on the road to Toledo. I'd never met him, but I knew his face from the faded photos in Carmen's living room, his sharp jawline, his kind eyes. But now those eyes were hollow, devoid of life, staring through me as if I were a ghost. Beside him stood Ana, Javier's sister, who had vanished during a hiking trip in the Pyrenees 3 years ago. Her dark hair was matted, her skin pale as moonlight, but it was her, the same Ana who had taught me how to dance flamenco at a family wedding, her laughter bright and infectious. And the third was my mother, Elena. My mother, who had died when I was 7, taken by a sudden illness that left me with nothing but fragmented memories of her warmth, her perfume, her gentle hands braiding my hair. Her face was unchanged, frozen in time, her dark eyes wide and sorrowful, but they were wrong, accusing, filled with a pain that cut through me like a knife. I stumbled back, the shovel clattering to the ground, my mind screaming that this couldn't be real, that I was dreaming, hallucinating, anything but facing this impossible truth. "No!" I gasped, tears stinging my eyes, my voice breaking. "This isn't possible." Carmen stood, her movements slow and deliberate, like a priestess performing a sacred rite. She walked toward me, her black dress trailing dust, her eyes never leaving mine. "This place," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that pressed against my chest, "is a crossroads, a place where the veil between the living and the dead is thin. My family has guarded it for generations, Isabella. But you've disrupted the balance by coming here." I shook my head, my vision blurring with tears, my hands trembling as I backed away. "You're not making sense," I said, my voice rising, desperate. "You're sick. You need help. Let me take you to a doctor, to a hospital. Please." Carmen's laugh was cold, hollow, like the wind whistling through an abandoned church. "Sick?" she said, her voice dripping with something close to pity. "No, child, I'm not sick. I'm cursed." She began to explain, her voice low and haunting, as if reciting a story she'd carried for decades, a burden too heavy to bear. The cottage, she said, sat on an ancient site, a place where the boundaries between worlds were fragile, where the dead could slip through if not held back. Her family, the Morales line, had been chosen, cursed, she called it, centuries ago to guard this crossroads, to keep the dead from spilling into the world of the living. The rituals were gruesome, requiring blood, pain, sacrifice. For decades, Carmen had performed them in secret, alone in the barn under the cover of night, her hands stained with the cost of keeping the veil intact. She spoke of symbols carved into the earth, of chants in a language older than Spanish, of offerings that went beyond food or wine. The blood I'd seen in the house wasn't hers. It belonged to someone else, someone who had come too close to the truth. someone who had threatened the delicate balance she was sworn to protect. "Who?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury, my hands clenching into fists. "Whose blood was that?" Carmen's eyes darkened, and she looked away, her hands twisting together, her knuckles white. "Javier's," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, heavy with regret. The world tilted, the ground shifting beneath me. My knees buckled, and I grabbed the edge of a nearby crate, its splintered wood biting into my palm. "No," I whispered, my voice breaking, tears streaming down my face. "Javier's at work. He's in Madrid. I spoke to him yesterday. He was fine." "He was here," Carmen said, her voice heavy, her eyes refusing to meet mine. "Last night, he came asking questions. He'd found my journals, the ones I kept hidden in the attic, locked in a chest he was never meant to open. He read about the rituals, the sacrifices. He saw too much, Isabella. He tried to stop me, to destroy the symbols, to end the curse. And they took him." The figures in the shadows began to move closer, their footsteps silent but their presence suffocating, pressing against me like a physical force. Their eyes, Miguel's, Anna's, my mother's, were fixed on me, unblinking, filled with something I couldn't name. Grief, anger, longing. My mother's face was the worst, her expression one of betrayal, her lips moving silently, forming words I couldn't hear but felt in my bones. "You left me," her voice echoed, not in the air but in my mind, sharp and piercing, cutting through the fog of my panic. "You let me go!" I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat, raw and primal. I backed toward the door, my hands fumbling for the shovel, my vision blurred with tears. "This isn't real!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the barn, swallowed by the shadows. "You're lying! Javier's alive!" Carmen stepped closer, her hands outstretched, her face a mask of sorrow and resolve. "You can't leave now, Isabella," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "You've seen them. You're part of this." The figures began to chant, their voices a low, guttural hum that vibrated in my chest, growing louder, more insistent, a rhythm that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air grew heavier, the shadows thicker, pressing against me, suffocating me. I lunged for the door, my fingers brushing the handle, but it slammed shut with a deafening bang, the sound reverberating through the barn, shaking the walls. The lantern flickered, its flame dancing wildly, casting grotesque shapes that seemed to writhe and twist, closing in around me. I swung the shovel blindly, desperate to keep the figures at bay, but they didn't flinch. They weren't human, not anymore. "Carmen, please," I begged, my voice breaking, tears streaming down my face. "Tell me where Javier is. Tell me he's okay." She hesitated, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the woman I knew, the mother-in-law who had welcomed me with warm embraces, who had taught me how to make her family's tortilla de patatas, who had cried at our wedding, her eyes shining with pride. But then her expression hardened, her eyes cold as stone, and she shook her head. "He's with them now," she said, gesturing to the figures, her voice heavy with finality. "He crossed the veil. There's no bringing him back." I screamed again, a sound that tore from my soul, and lunged at Carmen, the shovel raised, my vision clouded with rage and grief. But she stepped aside with an eerie grace, her movements too quick, too precise, as if she were no longer bound by the laws of the physical world. The figures closed in, their hands reaching for me, cold as ice, their touch burning against my skin, searing through my clothes. I fought, kicking and clawing, my nails scraping against something that felt like flesh, but wasn't. Something that gave way like smoke. The chanting grew louder, the air thicker, the darkness swallowing me, pulling me under. The last thing I saw was my mother's face, her eyes filled with tears, her lips forming words I couldn't hear, her hand reaching for me as the world faded to black. When I woke, I was lying in the grass outside the barn, the morning sun blinding me, its warmth a cruel contrast to the cold that still lingered in my bones. My body ached, my clothes were torn, my hands smeared with dirt, and something darker, something that smelled of iron. The barn door was closed, the lantern gone, as if it had never been there. I stumbled to my feet, my head pounding, my vision swimming, and ran to the cottage, my breath ragged. The blood in the living room was gone. The chair was upright, its legs steady on the floor. The dishes in the sink were clean, gleaming as if freshly washed, the knife on the counter wiped spotless. The basket of food and medicine sat untouched on the kitchen table, the jars of gazpacho undisturbed, the bread still wrapped in its cloth. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it, and tried to call Javier, straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, each time met with the same robotic message, his voice cheerful and distant, a ghost of the man I loved. I dialed the police, my words tumbling over each other as I begged them to check the cottage, to find Carmen, to find Javier. I drove to La Puebla, tears streaming down my face, my foot heavy on the gas, the Renault rattling as if it might fall apart. At the police station, a small, cramped building with peeling paint and a single tired officer at the desk, I poured out my story, my voice hoarse, my hands gesturing wildly. They humored me, sending 2 officers to the cottage, their expressions skeptical but kind. They returned hours later, their faces grim but unsurprised. The cottage was empty, they said. No blood, no signs of a struggle, no Carmen. It was as if she'd never been there, as if the events of the night had been erased. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. The cold touch of those hands, the weight of my mother's accusing eyes, Carmen's chilling words. They were real as the ache in my chest, the grief that threatened to swallow me whole. Every night since, I dream of that barn, of the figures in the shadows, of Javier's face among them, his eyes pleading, his voice silent. I see my mother, her sorrowful gaze, her whispered accusations. I see Carmen, her black dress stained with mud, her hands outstretched, her voice echoing with the weight of centuries. I don't know if Javier is alive, trapped in some liminal space beyond the veil, or gone forever, his soul claimed by whatever curse binds that place. I don't know if Carmen is a victim of this curse, forced to guard the crossroads against her will, or its willing servant, a keeper of secrets too dark to fathom. But I know one thing. I'll go back. I've spent weeks, months, researching, digging through dusty archives in Madrid's libraries, scouring old records for any mention of the cottage, the barn, the land it sits on. I've found fragments, whispers in the village of La Puebla, stories of strange lights in the fields, of people who vanished without a trace, of rituals performed under the cover of night. I've uncovered sketches of symbols that match the ones I glimpsed carved into the barn's beams, symbols tied to ancient rites, to blood and sacrifice, to a pact made long before Spain was Spain. I've reached out to Javier's colleagues, his friends, anyone who might know where he was that night. They all say the same thing. He left work early, said he was going to check on his mother. No one's seen him since. His office is untouched, his desk still cluttered with papers, a half-finished coffee cup sitting by his computer, as if he might walk back in at any moment. I visited mediums, priests, even a curandera in a small village near Toledo, her hands gnarled, her eyes sharp with knowledge. She burned sage, muttered prayers, and told me the land was sangre y sombra, blood and shadow, a place where the dead linger, hungry for the living. She gave me a pouch of salt, a small iron cross, and a warning. If you go back, you may not return. But I have to. I need answers. I need to know if Javier is still out there, if I can save him, if I can bring him home. And if I can't, then I'll make sure no one else falls to that place. No one else loses someone they love to the shadows. I'm preparing now, gathering what I need. Salt, iron, candles, a journal to record everything, a knife sharper than the one Carmen left on her counter. I've written letters to my family, to Javier's cousins, to anyone who might care if I don't come back. I've marked the date on my calendar, the next new moon, when the veil is said to be thinnest. I'll drive back to that cottage, walk into that barn, face whatever lies beyond the veil. I'll find Carmen, or what's left of her. I'll find Javier, or I'll find the truth. Because I can't live with the not knowing. I can't live with the dreams, the shadows, the weight of my mother's eyes, the echo of Javier's voice. I'll go back, and I'll face the darkness, whatever it takes, even if it costs me everything.